We've got this unexploited Ben Affleck movie. I emailed him a year right after The Way Back came out,
That was great too.
and I'm sober, and he was newly sober, and I was like, "Hey, congratulations and on your sobriety!" And that film was really good. And he was very, very kind and very nice, and so I was really bummed when we reached out now with this new thing. Hey, can you come to the screening or whatever? And it's like, Ben won't be available for, it's like, I really wanted to see it. This movie really, this was his performance that launched him.
What do you do when there's nothing else to do,
All you gotta do is get the GI Bill.
You should be on Ed Sullivan.
Oh, why not?
Okay, so I gotta ask you right off the bat. It's funny. I was looking over your filmography, and I think I've seen all of your movies except for Going All the Way, which is interesting. That was one of the only films of yours that I hadn't seen, and I watched it again. I watched it last night. I actually really wanted to see the theatrical cut as well, just to be able to compare them, because I'm always kind of fascinated when a director goes back in and does a pretty radical director's cut. I couldn't really actually find it anywhere, but
Yeah.
it felt like when I was watching it last night, though, it felt very contemporary. It felt like a new movie. Was that what you?
Unbelievable that you say that, because it felt that way in the theater last night.
Yeah.
Didn't feel like, like I watch Arlington Road and even Mothman, and I'm like, they feel like late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Arlington Road, it just feels like it. It feels like of that era.
Yeah, not in a bad way though. In a good way. Yeah.
Mothman actually feels like a 70s movie again, because you feel more of the film of it.
Yeah.
I think because of Going All the Way, the rescore that we did, the new titles, the voiceover stuff, and the color saturation of it, it feels very pop, right?
Yeah.
It feels very vivid. And the original, it's such a radically different way of looking at it. It would be like, go look at your first novel, or as a writer, you look at your first novel, and now you get to rewrite that novel with your experience, your wisdom, and you never really nailed it, but you got to expand this section, replace this, put this back here, and redo it. That's why I like the director's edits. Like a director's cut to me always implies like, wow, somebody didn't let me release my version of the movie. That wasn't the case. I think we released this and it was kind of like, yeah, this was this version of it, and it sold at Sundance, and it's a little shorter than Sundance, so it's okay. But me and the editor always knew this whole chunk of the novel and this whole chunk of the story and the friendship wasn't really completely rendered. So Leo Trombetta, the editor, was always a lot angrier at what was released than me. So when we had a chance let's just find the tape, put it on a drive, and he loaded in his Avid, and we played around with it. It was like, okay, well, now what do we do with it? It wasn't until it became a little bit of commerce to say to Village Roadshow and Vine, who had the rights to the Lakeshore stuff, we've got this unexploited Ben Affleck movie. Do you want to do something with it? That led to Oscilloscope, to this new version.
Well, that was what was so strange in a way watching it yesterday, though. So it was like this new Ben Affleck movie was coming out, and he was like 25, and it was just like, it was wild watching it, because I think we're so familiar with him as an actor now. We don't remember young Ben. It's funny, unless I go back and I rewatch one of his old movies, I always think of Ben Affleck kind of in his mid 2000s period, Gone Girl Ben Affleck or something like that. I don't see him as the young Ben Affleck anymore. So it was wild.
What we should have done is we should have said, this is the Ben Affleck deep fake movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Tom Castleman, class of 48.
Sure, Gunner. Oh, yeah, hell, everybody knows shit.
I emailed him a year right after The Way Back came out.
That was great too.
And I'm sober, and he was newly sober, and I was like, "Hey, congratulations and on your sobriety." And that film was really good. And he was very, very kind and very nice. And I said, "Yeah, I might be working on a new version of Going All the Way." Like I had only just started. He goes, "God, I have such fond feelings of that movie." So I was really bummed when we reached out now with this new thing. Hey, can you come to the screening or whatever? And it's like, Ben won't be available for, it's like, I really want him to see it. This movie really, like, this was his performance that launched him.
He's often underrated. And it was interesting though, because I don't know, I guess I always thought of him when he was younger as more lightweight than he is now, but he was great in Going All the Way. He was really good. He was very charismatic. And I think him and Jeremy Davies made a really interesting team.
Sonny, telephone.
You know, to me, all those years is like wasted. Being a big rod. And now, as time goes on, I'm kind of becoming more inner directed, not giving a shit so much what the crowd thinks. You've always been kind of more of an inner directed guy.
The cast is really interesting though. Nick Offerman too, showing up in that. Like that was also, I was like, wow, his
first movie. It was his first movie.
And like a baby, like must have been in his 20s when he did it. Yeah, geez.
All of them. Yep.
See, these aren't pictures of how people look. They're of how they feel.
Wow, this is a twist. It's usually Jews who get kicked out of country clubs.
But I love Leslie.
He's going to do a Q&A.
Yeah.
He's going to do a Q&A with us next week.
Oh, very
and
cool.
He's like, look, I was barely in the movie. I'm like, look, Nick, you're in the movie. And he did a role in Nostalgia for me with Ellen Burstyn. So he's just been the greatest guy, and just seeing his success has been really.
It's hard to say though, who's gonna pop for when you watch something. Like you wouldn't know necessarily thinking that this guy in 25 years is actually gonna be a pretty big star, like a pretty legitimate, like, you know, bankable guy, like who everybody knows, you know, and it's great. I also love seeing Jill Clayburgh in the movie, and it's sad that she passed on, unfortunately, because I think people forget like when I was growing up, like what a big deal she was. Like she was one of the biggest stars in the world. Yeah.
You know, the movie got financed by Lakeshore for $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Rosenberg, all he said was, just get me two women.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can cast whoever you want. So I'm like waiting to meet Farrah Fawcett at the Bel Air Hotel.
Wow, Farrah Fawcett? Really? Wow.
To play Nina. She doesn't show up to the meeting. And they're like, oh, you got to meet Goldie Hawn and all this shit. And I'm like, we fly to Chicago to meet Rosenberg, and we have the list.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met Diane Weitz to play Sonny's mom. She was a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
And we met her. She was really nice, but she passed. So he looks at the list. We're going down the list, and he goes, it was Jill Clayburgh, Leslie Ann Warren. He goes, they'll do it.
I guess he just got too busy raising Cain down in Greenwich Village with the rest of the communists.
It's sad that Clayburgh's not around anymore, though, because I do remember her from when I was a kid. Like, you know, one of the great actresses of her era, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And Leslie Ann Warren, you know, she's had a good career though. I mean, I loved her in Victor Victoria, you know, and of course, like, you know, she's. I mean, I think she's still got a pretty decent career going though. Like, she's kind of, you know, interesting though. So, okay, you said it was $3 million in 1996. I'm curious, how much time did you have to shoot it?
I shot for 30 days.
Really, I feel like nowadays you have a really hard time getting 30 days for an indie.
That now, because I know that I do this all the time, and it's even like 10 years ago, the 3 million is now like 5. It's really hard. So you just go to different budget tiers, but like even by the time I did Henry Poole, 30 was 25.
Yeah.
You know, now it would be, they'd try to do this in like 21 or 22.
As he looked around his room, Sonny thought about the conversation he had with Gunnar on the train. What good, he said, was a culture built on Sunday church piety and weekday business hypocrisy.
Or I made Going All the Way for Lakeshore. So this guy, Tom Rosenberg, was and soon after, maybe within 6 months after Going All the Way came out, maybe a little longer, my producing partner got the script for Arlington Road through a guy who was a producer at the Nichols Fellowship. And at that time, producers could get material from Nichols Fellowship winners, and it was a semifinalist. And he sent it to somebody, and they didn't have a director, and that friend sent it to my producing partner. And I read it, and we took it to Lakeshore, and they optioned it the next day, and Tim Robbins was attached within a week.
Nice.
It was the fact I was in the right place at the right time. So they believed in me and they liked me, but I wouldn't have been the candidate to go from a $3 million thing to a thriller like that. But I had the producer who held the rights said, great, Lakeshore likes it, let's go. And I think probably doing the videos helped.
I couldn't imagine. It's funny though. I think I told you last time I talked to you. I'll never forget seeing Arlington Road in theaters though, and that ending. And I remember watching it with my buddy at the time, and we just kind of like we could not believe what we were seeing. We'd never seen an ending like that before in our lives, and I remember it just like exploded. And we thought it was like probably the most brilliant thing we'd ever seen, and it was unreal.
It was the same way I felt when I read the script, and you read the page and you're like, and it was the same feeling.
You ever worked on a farm, Michael?
Do you miss that era though, the late 90s? Because that's the one I always kind of, I'm very nostalgic for that era of indie films, because I think that's when I started to love movies. Was kind of the wave of stuff that was coming out of Sundance in the late 90s, and
I really do, because when I was putting together, collecting a lot of material, LA Times, Sunday, Tuesday, LA Times from like 1999, and just opening it, like the amount of movies, the ads, the amount of theaters it's in, just like crazy. I mean, crazy. Premiere Magazine, just like all the movies, all of them, and it was so fertile.
Stop the van! Sir, step out of the vehicle. There's a bomb in the van! Sir, step out of the vehicle! Michael!
So you did a pretty radical recut of Going All the Way. Is that the only movie that you would do that to? Do you have other movies in your filmography that you feel like you'd love to re-examine now from a contemporary spot? I feel like it'd be hard to do that with Arlington Road, because it's such a movie that's kind of tied into its time, especially with like domestic terrorism and stuff like that.
Well, we've been trying, we're close, but to do the TV version of it. And the guy's got a great take on it, a great pitch. I mean, why it hasn't sold yet, I don't know. I don't know whether people are just like afraid of anything that's risky. Do you know, when you think about, all this peak TV and all this stuff, nothing really is that daring.
No.
Right? I mean, at least for me, but this pitch is so good and contemporized in a way of like getting into the vibe of paranoia and conspiracy theories now. I mean, think about it. It's like, could there be a better time for that thing? I don't know how I'd recut it, other than we had to do for Polygram, right? Who distributed it, right? We had to do a version where Jeff Bridges, we have to do a version where he doesn't die.
What? How is that even possible?
Okay, so we shot a take. Now, Tom Rosenberg was a real maverick, right?
Yeah.
He's like, okay. And I remember we're in the parking garage, and we had to do a take where Robert Gossett, the FBI agent.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, his wife's partner, right? Yeah.
Right. Who opens the van.
Yeah.
And they say a line like, hey, we're all authorized, like, da-da-da, Wit. Or Jeff's there, and they hustle Jeff away to the basement of the thing. And Wit is the one who goes down and discovers the bomb. Ostensibly that, like, the building blows up, but Jeff would live like we hadn't even like written it. Like they're just like, well, let's just shoot that so we have it. And we're shooting it, we're getting ready to shoot, and Tom Rosenberg's just like, just shoot it. Like, you know, we got it, like, if we're gonna use it, like he's like, just shoot it. Literally, there's like a grip stand, there's a light stand, there's a thing, there's like a crew member. And I said, roll, and we just shot the take. So we technically had it.
You never
and
he's
like, okay, we're done, we got it, let's keep going.
Objects, memories, items that are tangible. These are our artifacts.
I just sent the editor sent me the early cut of Nostalgia. And I was like, I could recut that one. And I think in a different pace and a different feeling. It would be a different version of it.
Yeah.
But like that's one that I might do. I wouldn't recut I'm Out With You.
I still love that movie.
I'm very happy with like that output. That was very much of its time of my where I was in my space.
Well, I guess, yeah, and that's the thing. You can't, you know, it's sometimes I feel like for a movie like that, especially if it's very personal, it might be almost inauthentic to go back years later and, you know, warts and all, it's probably better off the way it was. But I mean, I love I'm Out With You. It's always been a movie that meant a lot to me personally.
I would love to, I tell you what, I'd love to screen that again. I'd love to, like, you know, I just exchanged emails with Tom Quinn, who bought it at Magnolia, who runs Neon now.
Sure.
And he was just like, God, he goes, I love that movie, but I should like run and be like, hey, what about you re-release?
It would be fascinating to re-release it and to see how people, especially in the era of like everybody says like toxic masculinity and stuff like that. Like it was really ahead of its time in a lot of ways, I think.
How the fuck would you know what people need? Who pays your tuition? Huh? Who pays your fucking rent?
Other movie I have to mention though to you, have to do it because it's also another like movie that's kind of in the pantheon at our site is the Mothman Prophecies. And I was wondering if you have any, because it's funny, we have a horror section of the site, Arrow in the Head or JoBlo Horror. We do videos on Mothman Prophecies all the time, and they always get like 100,000 views and stuff. Like it's always like really popular. And that's another movie that I don't know how well you thought it was received when it came out, but man, has it ever stood the test of time. People still love that movie.
It really has. And I mean, if I get one, I get, I'd say a half a dozen emails or something, or comments or messages a month on that one. And somebody said, why isn't that movie streaming? Like if that movie could get out and be on Netflix or something like that, I'm like, well, it's kind of like not my control. I don't control the distribution. You know, I see it every now and then on cable.
Yeah.
I don't know how movies that Sony or Screen Gems release suddenly jump to these other platforms. You know, we've been doing this TV version of that for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm more and more, and it would be really fun to play on the canvas and do that, but TV just takes so long, right? And just it's such a slow boat. I said to the people the other day that are behind, I said, why don't we just do a sequel to the film? Let's make a sequel.
What's my
So what are you up to next? Would you it's funny, I always really like your stuff with John Hamm as well. He's a guy I'd like to see get some like an amazing movie. I find is the one thing that he hasn't gotten yet. Like that would really, he would be great in a Mothman Prophecies type movie. I feel like people would be, because he's so personable, people would love him in that.
It's a great idea.
See if he'll do it.
More Mothman with Hamm.
Yeah.
No, he would be, you know, I want him to play, there's a kind of a thriller about a psychic that we're getting ready to go out with. And I'm like a psychic gets his comeuppance.
Yeah.
But then they're worried about, oh, it's like Nightmare Alley. I'm like, no, totally different feel. Yeah. But like, I'm like, Hamm. I just keep thinking of like Hamm would be great. Ham would be great in that.
Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, Sarah's time we're running out of time, but it was amazing talking to you, and I'll talk to you again soon on Facebook, I'm sure.
Great seeing you. Have Sarah get. Do I have your email right?
Yeah, I'd like to see the original cut. If you could send that to me, that'd be amazing.
I'll send it to you right now.